I am Kathryn Kidder. I'm here today on July 2nd, 2020 with Ileen Cheek. For the transcriber, would you please state your full name, including your maiden name?
Full name is Elsie Ileen Griffin Cheek.
Great. And I am so grateful, Ileen, that you're here to do this with us. We have agreed to talk about the Agricultural Women's Club, which was founded at the University of Florida in 1908 and disbanded last month, June 2020. But I would like to start with some history of you. So where were you born?
I was born in Corpus Christi, Texas.
And what was that date? If you care to divulge.
Oh, I'm fine with that. December 24th, 1949. I am now 70 years old.
Okay, a proud 70.
Yes.
So, were you born at home or in a hospital?
In a hospital.
Mm-hmm. And your parents' names?
Ernest Griffin and Kitty Griffin.
And were they from Texas?
They were. Everybody in both of our families was from Texas. We were the first ones to escape.
And also from Corpus Christi. Were they from Corpus Christi?
My parents, well, from several places in Texas. They had lived during their lifetime. And Jimmy's family's from a little town called Hyco, Texas, which is in central Texas.
Mm-hmm. And would you like to tell us your grandparents' name? And they were Texans as well?
They were. My mother's side, it was Hubert and Buna Mae McCollum. And on my dad's side, it was Julius and Eunice Griffin. And yeah, they were all in Texas. I think both families moved around within the state during their time there.
Did you grow up in Corpus Christi?
I did. I was born there. I grew up there. Graduated from high school, started college, everything there.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe the home that you lived in as a child?
Well, it was little. I was the only child, and my dad built our house, and it was a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, and he had a big vegetable garden that he always worked in, and he was a big fisherman. So we just stayed there. He had been in the Navy in World War II, and after the war, when they let everybody out, they hired a lot of veterans back at their bases as civil service employees. And so he worked at the Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi, as did my mother's father. So that's hence why they were both in that location. And they were in that house until I actually finally had to move them to assisted living after they had been there 60-something years, I think. So, yeah, our family.
What were some of your early memories of those years before you started school?
Yes, well, I do remember some things. One striking memory was when I was 6 years old, just before I started school, my mother had polio. And we had to take her to the hospital. We'd been out on Padre Island fishing. And I remember my dad leaving me in the car, which, parents wouldn't do that now. But I was 6 and it was dark and I was scared to death. And I think it was hours. I think it was a few minutes, probably in retrospect, that he left me there and took her to the hospital. And so that was right before I started school. They actually made a special exception to let her out so she could see me start school. And as a family, we did a lot of, the Corpus Christi has Padre Island, that North Padre Island borders the city. So we spent a lot of time out there going fishing, collecting seashells, doing things like that. And then my dad growing his garden. And we were very active in a church there that my parents were actually charter members of it when it started. So it was kind of a typical childhood. Not
Sounds like
much
a
money, but we were
wonderful
fine.
one. What about your school years? What are your memories of those times?
Well, I went to a little elementary school, started right in the neighborhood, and I remember I was very proud that I could walk back and forth to school. And on the first day, my dad followed me in the car. He had to take a day off of work because he had to get mother home from the hospital and me to school. I didn't have any school supplies because she'd been in the hospital the past 2 weeks. He took me to school, and the teacher gave him a list, and he went out and bought them. And I was very embarrassed that my dad came right back in the classroom with all my things for the year. But even though I insisted on walking, he followed me home in the car the first day. And after that, I could walk back and forth to school. And second grade, I think I quit school and walked home, which my mother promptly took me back and told me I had to go to school. And I went then to junior high. Back then, we didn't have middle schools. They were junior high. And then my first air-conditioned school to go to was in high school. They built a new high school, and I got to go to that. And when you keep in mind, this is South Texas, and it was regularly 90 degrees or more from probably sometime in April through up till almost November. So it was hot. And I remember little girls always had to wear dresses. There were no shorts and no pants. But it was good.
Were you in activities in school?
Well, yes, I was a Brownie and a Girl Scout early on. I remember being in the pep squad in junior high. And then in high school, probably my biggest one was the biology club. And I spent 2 or 3 years in that, I think. And then church youth groups are always big for me.
Sounds like you kept busy. Did you have an eye on a career at that stage of life?
Well, by the time I got to high school, I was interested in either architecture or interior design. I narrowed that to interior design. And I ended up majoring in home economics because Jimmy and I got married when I was 19, and where we lived, the college did not have interior design because then there were only maybe 2 or 3 schools in Texas that offered that, and we didn't live in one of those places. I had planned to go to Texas Women's University, had my roommate and everything was in, and then we decided to get married because Jimmy graduated from college and had a job in Beaumont, Texas. So we moved there, and I finished school at Lamar University in home economics. So, and that worked fine.
Uh-huh. So, back to your family, was education important?
Yes, it was. It was very important because my dad did not graduate from high school. He was a air conditioning, refrigeration mechanic and worked for the Navy his whole life. So it was important. Now, my mother, when I was in high school, went to school and became a practical nurse. But education was important. That was a really big discussion when I said we wanted to get married and I was 19, was, oh, you'll never finish college. And I was like, oh, yes, I will. And I did. You know, we didn't have any children for 7 years. So as we both were finishing, we waited till Jimmy finished his PhD before we moved to Florida and then started a family. But education was very important.
Did you said they valued education? Did that they did worry about you not finishing college? Did you go on immediately to get that degree?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I finished that degree in 3.5 years because after that, I started going year-round to school. I went every term. So, yes.
And did you go to work then in that? Did you work in that field?
Yes, I taught my first year out of college, I taught home economics at Charlton Pollard High School in Beaumont, Texas. At that time, it was an all-black high school, and I was 22 and had this long brown hair, and I would have that first 6 weeks, it was a learning experience for the students and me. I couldn't understand them and they couldn't understand me. We spoke the same language, but we didn't understand each other. But we came around and it was fun. And I still remember kids would walk up in the hallway just to touch my hair to see what it felt like. But, we did fine. I only taught there 1 year because the next year we moved to College Station and Jimmy started on his PhD. But it was good. I enjoyed that.
What year was that?
It was 1970, I think the 72, 73 school year.
So you said it was all black at that time.
Yes.
Were the schools at all integrated there?
Yes, some were. There was some kind of special court order that allowed Beaumont to maintain the all-black high schools because the black communities wanted their high schools, and there were 2 of them in town. And then the other schools were all integrated. It always seemed kind of strange to me. Now, that school actually, last year, I think it was, we were back in Beaumont visiting. The high school is no longer there, but they have a Charlton Pollard Elementary, and I got to go visit the elementary school in that neighborhood. They built a very nice school there. And yes, it is integrated.
Yes, but you were right in that era where that was happening.
Yes. I mean, that was, back there in the George Wallace era. So being in the South,
that wasn't a problem in your school there.
No, it didn't seem to be a problem in Beaumont. And in Beaumont, they had what they called a freedom of choice. A child could go to any school within the system they wanted to. I think that's how they managed to have the black high school. They were not forced to go there. And many black children did not. They went to schools that were integrated.
Mm-hmm.
But it was quite an education for both the students and me.
In what sense? Do you remember any examples of that?
Yes. Around Thanksgiving, we collected food to have food baskets to take to needy families. Well, now, all of these students were very, very families low income. Let me tell you, when they help you identify a family that needs food, they need food. I still remember the students brought in, and that was when USDA would give excess food, and it was labeled. They brought some of that in to me to put in the baskets. And I still remember Jimmy and I going shopping to fill out the baskets. And, you get really, and we were not wealthy people then at all, but we bought a lot of food for those baskets because we felt bad for it. And then when we had, and Beaumont is in southeast Texas, right at the border of Louisiana. And so we had a little Christmas dinner with the kids at school. They had some good food. When they tell you where to go get something, it's good. And I had to make home visits as part of my job as a home economics teacher. So I went into all their homes. Now the principal looked at me and looked at them and decided I could have my period off to do that, the last period of the day, and I could check the girls out and take them with me because he didn't want me going in those neighborhoods by myself. And I did appreciate that a lot. But they had very nice parents. Some of them were just so poor, so very poor. But nice families. I still remember going into one family and dinner was turkey necks and dressing. I'd never eaten the turkey necks. I didn't think you kept that other than, to get some broth to make up the gravy with. But they were all very nice. Their home projects were interesting because they had no money. But we improvised and we made it.
Did they, you taught then cooking and sewing and all the
Cooking and
skills?
sewing and child development, family life. I still remember I'm teaching child development at 22. I've never had a child at this point. And so I had to go out and buy a layette for a baby. So I go in a store. Well, of course, the clerks think I'm having one. But I got it. Well, some of my students were having babies. When I gave my final exam, 3 of them brought their children with them. And let's just say a few items went missing in the layette set because they would need them more than me. So it was really interesting to see that. I mean, it was kind of hard for me to teach them about raising a child when they had the child. I'd had the child development classes, but they had the children.
I understand what you mean about everybody getting educated.
Yes.
Did you work later in your life outside the home?
Oh, yes. When Jimmy went back to Texas A&M to get his PhD, I actually worked as a secretary for 2 agricultural engineers. I loved that job. I loved it. I was young. I didn't know better. I volunteered for every job, to walk all over the campus, to do anything. And I had a college degree. I could help them with papers. I remember one professor would have his graduate students bring his papers to me and tell me, you read them and clean them up before I read them. And it was fun. I did that for 2 years. And then when he graduated, we moved to Florida. And let's see, when my second child was 4 years old, I worked as a preschool director and did that for several years. I think 6 or 7 years as a preschool director. While my kids were mostly in elementary up until they started high school, I did that half time. It was a good job. I could send them to school, go to work, and then be back home before they got off the bus. And then when they were in high school, in a while, I worked for Randy Caton, an oral surgeon in town, in his front office doing transcription. And that was a very part-time job. 3 mornings a week I'd go in and work. But it was fun. I joked that I worked for him just so I could do a flower arrangement every week for the office.
Oh, was that one of your hobbies?
Yes, it was.
And skills.
I think it's something I learned to grow flowers, and I like plants a lot just from my dad having a big garden. And just always liked to arrange flowers. And I was in the garden club in Gainesville, and I am in Knoxville too. And so I like to practice on arranging flowers. So he had a florist bringing flowers. And after I worked for him about a month, I said, could I do that? And he said, sure.
Wonderful. I wish I had you. That's great. So well, before we get you to Gainesville, you want to tell me where you are right now?
I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. We have been here since February of 2009. Jimmy took the job as chancellor. He is now not the chancellor. He stepped out of that 3 years ago. He's a a chancellor emeritus, actually, and he works part-time at the university, still teaches some classes. So I'm in Knoxville.
Well, Gainesville misses you. And
I miss Gainesville terribly.
But let's go back to, let's see, the year you moved to Gainesville was?
1975.
Okay. And when did you hear about the Agricultural Women's Club, and why? Was it?
Well, pretty fast, because we got to Gainesville in August, and in September there was a welcoming reception for all the newcomers that year. I remember it. It was at the Browning's house, Charlie and Magda Browning. He was the dean then in agriculture. And so the reception was at their house. And in 1975, there were a lot of agricultural women. I remember it was a very crowded thing. And I went and joined and participated the whole time we were there. So it was a nice organization. And that, I think it was more of the norm back then. That's what wives did, you know. But it was nice. It was a good way to meet a lot of people.
So that reception, you said, was that an IFAS reception or an entire university or?
No, it was IFAS. It was just IFAS. Yeah.
And all the parts of IFAS were there.
Yeah, that was all the IFAS ladies. And there was a University Women's Club that did this. They were parallel organizations then, and both were pretty good size.
Mm-hmm. And what did you expect of the organization? Why did you join?
Well, I didn't really know what to expect from the organization because it was my first time out. But it was an opportunity to get to know other people probably in similar circumstance to me there were a lot of us that were relatively new to Gainesville at that time, and we became friends. And there were just a lot of social activities that we could plan together. You know, there were picnics, there were luncheons, things like that. And I don't remember, we had maybe 4 or 5 group activities in a year, and everybody got on a committee to do one, and you helped out with it. That's how you got to know people, was working on the small groups, planning events.
Did you feel any pressure to join?
I wouldn't say pressure. I sort of felt like that's what I should do, but I didn't feel like I had to. I mean, it was easy to not do it. And as time went on and more women had their own jobs, you know, fewer of them were joining, but there wasn't really pressure.
Were you aware of the long history of the club or background?
Not at the beginning, I was not. Because I didn't come from a university background initially, so I didn't know how these things worked.
And who were the other members of the club? Faculty or were there?
Not many faculty. It was mostly wives. Administration wives, I think, were all members back then. And then just a lot of newcomers like me. You know, there were a lot of us that were, I mean, I was 25 years old. So it was a young group. The ones that had been around a little longer were the ones that were heading up things and helping us all find our way.
And what was your role in the Ag Women's group?
Well, I was trying to remember that after I agreed to do this. I know that I was on several committees planning events. I can't remember if I actually held an office within the group. It wouldn't surprise me if I did. I know I did in University Women's Club. But mostly I remember planning picnics and luncheons. One year, actually near the end of our time there, we had a fashion show at my house. We had just built a house out in San Francisco, and I had a huge lanai. We set up all the tables, and people ate lunch out there, and we had a little fashion show right there. But we used a lot of venues to have things, and we had picnics. They were always a lot of fun. I remember I was on the planning committee for a picnic at West Side Park. And we'd spent a lot of time getting this ready, planning games for kids and the families. And we had food coming in. We were making stuff and bringing. I think we bought barbecue. Anyway, the morning of the picnic, it rained and rained and rained all day. And we all got there and we had lunch, but we just didn't have any outdoor fun that day. They had a little meeting room and we were stuffed in there.
It is a little meeting room.
It is, and we were a decent sized group then. I think we were lined up all around the building, on the sidewalk, hunched under the eaves, and we
That
made it.
fashion show, what did a store do that with you?
I think so. I think so. I believe Belk Lindsay, which I don't know if they're even still in the mall, they became Belk's. I believe they were the store that provided the clothing for that.
Were you a model?
Oh, yes. There was less of me then, so I looked better.
Uh, what other events? You said picnics. Where were they, and what were they like?
Well, trying to remember. I guess because I worked on the one at Westside Park, I remember that one so well. I honestly don't remember where the other picnics were, but I know we had them. And we had luncheons. I believe we might have used the Gainesville Women's Club for some functions. The Gainesville Garden Club has a building that we could have used. I don't remember where we did them all, but we had them.
Those are big venues, so the group
They are.
was
Well, we were
quite large then.
Yeah, as the picnics and some of the dinner events, like we always had a Christmas party. Those we would have to get a place until the university women had a building built for them. We would go places because husbands came and we'd have big parties then.
So husbands were involved in some or all of the
Yes.
activities?
Not all of them, but some. Usually the picnics and the Christmas dinner they were involved in.
And children?
Children for picnics, but that's about the only time because the picnics and the luncheons were about the only things that did not happen. I mean, and the dinner. Everything else happened during the day around lunch. So it was just the women for those.
So that was an era when women were available for lunch.
As a matter of fact, I remember early on, my big issue was finding a babysitter in the middle of the day for children when they were preschool age. I had some nice neighbors.
Yes. Do you remember when they started the scholarship effort? Because it was mainly a social organization from the beginning.
Yes. I don't remember when they started the scholarships. I remember being on the scholarship committee. That was actually probably my favorite committee to be on, was the scholarship committee. I think we began to accumulate a little money and people would give money to the scholarship fund. We had a dues every year. We charged pretty much just to cover expenses, our luncheons and things. But I guess some people gave some money because we were able to establish a scholarship fund.
And
It started
as
off as
part of the committee, what did you do?
well, we'd worked through the dean's office to put out an appeal for students to apply, and they helped us with that and collected the applications. And then there was a committee of 3 or 5, something like that. And we personally read every application and then would have a meeting and rank them and decide who was awarded a scholarship. And every now and then, I remember one year we had a young lady who was an amazing student, but she was a softball player for UF. And we wanted to give her a scholarship. I think she was majoring in something like chemistry and something. Maybe it was biochemistry. Anyway, she had a difficult major in college. Well, so we decided to award her a scholarship, and all this has to go back through and get approved. You can't give an athlete a scholarship outside of athletics, we found out. So we really wanted to give her one, but she was not eligible, so we gave another one. And after a few years in it, we advanced to giving graduate students scholarships. One year, it seems like we had $2,000 or $3,000 extra left. So we said, why don't we give graduate scholarships? So we did. And I remember reading their applications and telling Jimmy, when we give money, we need to give money for graduate scholarships. I said, they don't have any help. Their parents aren't sending them to college. They're not getting any of these lottery scholarships. They don't have money. And so they were the most appreciative group, I think, to get scholarships. I still remember we would invite our scholarship recipients to our May luncheon, and they would tell us a little about themselves. And now keep in mind, we had read these things very carefully, and we thought vetted them. And one young lady gets up there and says she's going to use some of her money to go to the beach and buy a bikini. And we're on immediately, oh my gosh, what have we done? But that's what you get, you know.
But overall, it was successful and needed. Sounds like it was needed. At some point, maybe before the scholarship started, didn't they collect money for some children? Oh, the Children's Home Society or some kind of child welfare or adoption?
Yeah, they did. I'd forgotten about that, but they did do that. Seems like maybe at Christmas we collected that money. I can't remember. But yes.
Do you remember the fundraising with the jewelry?
Oh, yes. It was always fun to send somebody out to procure that piece of jewelry and model it during our luncheon.
Can you explain what that was, how that worked?
Well, Klaus Jewelry Store would give us something. And evidently, some of the husbands of the group were shoppers there, and so they knew us. And they would give us some piece of jewelry, a necklace, a bracelet, earrings, or something quite desirable. And I believe we sold raffle tickets for those at the meal, and you could buy however many tickets you wanted to. But they were quite popular, and one member would wear it around, and then they'd pass it around, and everybody would have a chance to covet that piece of jewelry. And then we'd get our lottery tickets and see. And we had other things. Seems like that happened at Christmas quite often because we would give poinsettias away. You know, if you had a ticket for a poinsettia, that's nice, but it wasn't a piece of jewelry. But we'd have a few other things to give too. But that was a good fundraiser. It helped with our scholarships a lot.
Were there other scholarships, other fundraisers that you organized for that?
I don't recall them. Just last night, our son and his family were over here for dinner, and one of their kids had looked up on the bookshelf. Their little boys are 4 and 6, and he saw a book with a gator on it, and it was the Gator Cookbook, and the University Women's Club did that for a fundraiser, and I worked on that. So Deanne Connor worked on that. She did a lot with it. Actually, it was a lot of the people from Ag Women that worked on that, but I believe it was a University Women's Club's, I know it was, project.
What kind of cookbook was that? It
was the Gator Cookbook, and it was big. I was, what's her name, Marilyn? Forget her last name. She and I typed all of it. That was a job. We had no idea how many recipes would come. That cookbook was a good 1.5 inches thick. And we typed all those recipes, and then we hired our son, Jeff, the one that was here with his family last night, to get all that information transferred to a disk for a computer to send to the publisher, because I think he was in high school then. He knew way more about computers than we did. I mean, we could both type on a computer and print something, but we were not skilled at how to store data and have it in a form that the publisher could take, so he did that for us. But agricultural women, generally on the campus at Florida, was probably the most representative group in university women.
So the two groups were pretty
Yeah.
well intertwined. Yeah.
They were very much, yes.
I enjoy your saying that even then, we needed teenagers then, and we still are needing them now as technology
Oh, gosh, yes.
goes on.
10-year-old grandson, I can give him anything I need done, and he figures it out way faster than me.
It sounds like you were very busy in those years. How did you manage family, other activities, and some
Well,
work
obviously,
and
had
all
a
of
lot
those?
more energy then than I do now. Because I look back, and I participated in University Women, Agricultural Women, did a lot at church, worked part-time, had the kids and took them to all their activities, went to games and all that stuff, and didn't seem to think I was overworked. I think it was the age. That's what you do. Now, I spent all afternoon getting food ready, cooking dinner for yesterday. And then my daughter-in-law immediately writes back last night and asked if the boys could come over today. And we said, yes, this afternoon they can. But I'm thinking, that was kind of tiring yesterday.
Yes, there's a reason we have children when we're young.
Yes, there is.
Did you feel a conflict among those things? Or you said it was,
It didn't seem,
you just did it.
I just did it. Yeah, I just kind of understood that's what I do and didn't really question it. Didn't feel overwrought at the time for all the things I was doing. I say now, if I could just have my 50-year-old body back, it worked a lot more hours than this one.
How do you feel the impact of the Agricultural Women's Club was on the surrounding community?
Well, I think it was a positive one. I do. I think people respected us for what we do. IFAS was a very impactful, still is, part of the university. And as a kind of as an arm of that, we were very supportive of agriculture and the projects around. And just by virtue of being part of that, we had access to some things. We knew where to find strawberries and blueberries. So I don't know. I think it was just a good thing for the community.
Was there any relationship between the club and the students? You did mention the scholarships.
The scholarships, and if we needed ambassadors to help us with a function, the IFAS ambassadors, usually a few of them would come out and help us when we needed it. If we were having a picnic and needed people to help carry things or help greet visitors, they would do that for us.
So they knew there was such an organization.
They did. They did.
There was a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And did your children ever comment on the club or do they remember any of the events?
Well, I don't know. Our son Jeff does, because he's the younger of our two and was probably around a little more while I was doing a lot of that. They knew I was a part of it. I can't say that they remember much about the events, but then I haven't asked them either. So,
yeah. Well, did you remain a member all the while you were in Gainesville?
Oh, yes.
So that makes you a very long time member. And how would you describe the changes in the organization over that long period?
Well, it got smaller. Younger women came and they had their own jobs. And so they were not necessarily free to participate in that. And while I didn't feel like I had to do it, it wasn't an obligation, it seemed like the thing to do back then. I don't think they felt that way generations after me. So it changed. It grew smaller, but we had a nice group of women. It was still a nice social time and time to get to know people.
Do you remember the anniversary celebrations? There was a 75th, and then there was the 100th anniversary in 2008.
I know we had them, but I don't remember particular details about them.
So you weren't real engaged in those particular events at that time.
So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how do you feel about the disbanding of the club?
Well, times change. And so I understand that, when it gets small enough probably that they can't go on, probably disbanding's a good thing because people will reform something else. People still like each other, and except for times of the COVID virus, like to be together in groups. And so I think they will still do things that will just be in a different shape.
And can you reflect on how the original founders might have thought about the end results of this organization? And
I think the original founders probably looked at it as a support organization for IFAS and for all the people working in IFAS. And I think it did accomplish that. So I think they would be pleased with how it progressed, and the fact that they stayed connected for so long to the university, provided fellowship for families, provided scholarships for students. So I think they would be proud of what happened with it.
I should have asked you before, but for the record, would you tell us what IFAS is?
Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences.
And it is what? What role does it have in the university?
It's huge. Well, it is, because IFAS has a senior vice president, whereas others, there's a senior vice president for medical school, there's IFAS, and then there's the provost one. So they're one of the three major divisions in the university. And IFAS is statewide. They're in every county in the state with extension offices. They have research centers all over the state. And they're very much a leader in Florida. Florida is a very agricultural state. Many people probably think they're all beaches, but there's a lot between those beaches on each side. And so they have a huge agricultural industry there, which I really enjoyed getting to know while we were there. During Jimmy's time as a dean and a vice president, I got to travel around the state with him to a lot of those research and extension centers, and loved seeing what they were doing. I mean, they literally touched every area in the state. So their role on campus was big. I mean, they had their own budget. So they had a lot going on there.
Is there anything else that you remember about your time with the Agricultural Women's Club that we haven't touched on?
Not especially. I think the most you gain from it's when you work in the small groups that are planning events. That's when you get to know people. And that was a lot of fun. And we'd meet in each other's homes and talk about what we were going to do. I think every year the membership was divided up among the events. Now, just because you were on that committee didn't mean you actually participated. You didn't have to. But it gave you an area. And it was a good way for somebody that didn't know many people to start working with them and get to know them. So that was probably the most fun was working with other ladies and planning things to do.
Well, I'm glad it was a good experience for you. Those are nice memories. As we wind down here, you mentioned the pandemic, and being an extraordinary year as it is, I'd be interested in knowing how you're adapting and what the pandemic has meant for you and your family.
Well, we're not traveling. We were supposed to go to Ireland this summer. That didn't happen, and California, and that didn't happen, and Maine. So it's brought us closer, much closer in. We're home a lot. I mean, everything happens online. We go to church online. Yesterday it was kind of funny. We had two friends come over because Jimmy's garden is producing a lot, and we were sharing vegetables, and we're just hungry to see people. So we agreed we'd wear a mask and sit on opposite sides of the room so we could just talk to each other. And we did, and we were all excited to see each other. We're managing just fine. We wear our mask and we go out on our essential runs, but we kind of miss getting to be with people. And look, I hope people will all cooperate and get this over with as soon as we can. I think football season will be interesting to watch in the Southeast Conference.
Indeed, indeed. Is there anything else you would like to add to our record? Anything in general that we haven't discussed you would like to?
Especially, I think I really liked my time there. I loved Florida. Thought we were going to finish our career there, and then Jimmy wanted to move, but it was a great place to live, to work. The university was so nice, and the people were just very nice to us. So we loved it. And things like the Agricultural Women's Club, the University Women's Club were very helpful in making that happen, I think.
Well, I think we can conclude soon. I really appreciate your taking the time to make these recollections and record them. These experiences and thoughts are very interesting and valuable.
It's been fun. It'll be interesting to see what everybody else does.
So I will now end the interview.
Okay, thank you.